The cradle sat in the corner like a coffin waiting for its purpose. Jack Thornton had delivered cattle through blizzards, faced down rattlers with steady hands, and buried 3 men who'd called him friend. But standing in the doorway of the makeshift clinic, watching the woman in white hover over that wooden cradle, something cold crawled up his spine and settled in his chest like winter fog. "Don't look in the cradle," she whispered without turning around. Her voice carried the weight of someone who'd seen too much. "Please," the nurse, Sarah, the townspeople called her, kept her back to him, her shoulders rigid beneath the blood-stained apron. Her hands shook as she arranged blankets that didn't need arranging. Outside, Bitter Creek's main street lay empty under a moon that seemed too bright, casting shadows that stretched like accusing fingers. Jack had ridden into town 3 hours ago, expecting nothing more than supplies and a hot meal. Instead, he'd found shuttered windows, whispered conversations that died when he approached, and children pulled quickly indoors by mothers who wouldn't meet his eyes. The saloon sat empty except for old Henrik, who'd pointed toward the clinic with a trembling finger and muttered something about God's punishment before drowning himself in whiskey. "I came about my horse," Jack said, though his eyes never left the cradle. "Tanner said you might know about veterinary work." Sarah's laugh held no humor. "Tanner's been dead since Tuesday." The words hit him like a physical blow. He'd shared coffee with Tanner just last month, listened to him talk about his plans to marry the school teacher come spring. What happened? Same thing that's been happening. She finally turned, and Jack saw a woman aged beyond her years with eyes that had witnessed something no human should. Started with the Jenkins baby, then the Morrison twins. Now, she gestured toward the cradle with a hand that wouldn't stop shaking. Jack took a step forward, drawn by something he couldn't name. The floorboards creaked under his boots, each sound unnaturally loud in the suffocating silence. From outside came the distant howl of a coyote, but even that seemed muted, as if the very air had grown thick with dread. "I said don't look," Sarah whispered, but her voice carried no authority now, only desperate pleading. Jack's hand found his gun automatically, though he couldn't say what enemy he expected to face. The cradle waited, innocent and terrible, holding secrets that had already destroyed a town's peace and claimed good men's lives. Section 2, Moral Decision. 7 babies in 2 weeks, Sarah continued, her voice barely audible. "All born perfect. All," she couldn't finish. Jack studied her face, noting the dark circles under her eyes, the way her hands trembled even when she tried to still them. "All what? Wrong." The word escaped like a prayer. "Something's wrong with them, Jack. Something that makes grown men weep and strong women lose their minds." She pressed her back against the wall as if trying to disappear into it. "The Morrison twins' mother threw herself down the well yesterday, said she couldn't bear to look at what she'd brought into the world." The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken horrors. Jack had seen death in many forms, violent, peaceful, sudden, lingering, but this felt different. This felt like something had crawled up from hell itself and made a home in Bitter Creek. "Maybe I should take a look," he said quietly. "Might be I've seen worse." "You haven't." Sarah's voice cracked. "Nobody has." Jack took another step forward, his spurs jangling softly. "Could be whatever's wrong, we can fix it. Find a doctor from the next town over, or we tried." Sarah's laugh bordered on hysteria. "Doc Peterson came from Silver Falls 3 days ago. Strong man, delivered babies through 2 territories, took one look in that cradle and rode out without a word. Found him the next morning, hung himself from an oak tree 5 miles out, left a note saying some things weren't meant for this world." The cradle seemed to pulse in his peripheral vision, drawing his attention like a lodestone draws iron. Jack fought the urge to look directly at it, sensing that once he did there'd be no turning back. But curiosity gnawed at him with sharp teeth, the same curiosity that had driven him to explore abandoned mines and track wounded bears into their caves. "What about the other babies?" he asked. "The ones from before?" Sarah's face went white. "Gone. Parents took them out into the desert. Some say they buried them. Others," she shuddered, "others say they just left them out there for the coyotes and rode away." Jack felt something cold settle in his stomach. "And this one, parents died in childbirth. Both of them, hemorrhaged out while I was trying to save the baby." She gestured helplessly toward the cradle. Been trying to figure out what to do with it ever since. Can't find anyone willing to take it. Can't. Her voice broke entirely. From outside came the sound of approaching horses, multiple riders moving at a steady pace. Sarah's eyes went wide with terror. "That'll be Sheriff Hawkins," she whispered. "He's been talking about burning the clinic down. Says it's the only way to stop the curse from spreading." Section 3. Danger arrives. The hoofbeats grew louder, accompanied by the low murmur of men's voices and the clink of weapons. Jack moved to the window, peering through a gap in the shutters. 6 riders sat their horses in the moonlight, faces grim beneath hat brims. Sheriff Hawkins dismounted, his hand resting on his gun butt as he studied the clinic. "Sarah Miller," Hawkins called out, his voice carrying the authority of a man accustomed to being obeyed. "Time to settle this matter." Jack watched the other riders spread out, forming a loose circle around the building. These weren't lawmen, they were townspeople pushed to desperation, ordinary men who'd convinced themselves that extraordinary measures were necessary. He recognized young Tom Fletcher, whose wife had given birth to one of the wrong babies, and old Samuel Creek, who'd helped build this very clinic 5 years ago. "We know you're in there," Hawkins continued, "and we know what's with you. This has gone on long enough." Sarah pressed herself against the far wall, as far from both the window and the cradle as she could manage. "They're going to burn it," she whispered. "Burn it all. They think fire will cleanse the evil." Jack checked his weapons, 6-shooter loaded, rifle by the door where he'd left it. 6 men, all armed, all desperate. The odds weren't impossible, but they weren't good either, especially not with an innocent woman caught in the middle. "There's got to be another way," he said. "Look in the cradle," Sarah said suddenly, her voice strange. "You want to understand. Look and see what's got everyone so scared they'd murder a nurse and burn down the only medical facility for 50 miles. The cradle seemed to call to him, its simple wooden frame somehow more ominous than any grave marker. Jack took a step toward it, then stopped as glass shattered somewhere in the building. The men outside weren't waiting any longer. "Fire in the hole," someone shouted, and the acrid smell of coal oil began to seep through the walls. "Sarah, we need to go, now." Jack moved toward her, but she shook her head frantically. "Can't leave it," she said. "Can't let them burn it alive. Whatever it is, it's still just a baby." Smoke began curling under the door. The men outside had started their fire, probably splashing coal oil around the building's perimeter. Soon the whole structure would be engulfed, and anyone inside would have precious little time to escape. "Choose," Sarah said, her eyes reflecting the orange glow beginning to flicker through the shutters. "Save yourself, or look in that cradle and understand why 7 families have fled into the desert rather than face what they brought into this world." Jack's hand hovered over his gun. Outside the flames crackled hungrily, and Sheriff Hawkins called out one final warning that fell on deaf ears. Section 4. Human Connection. The heat pressed against the walls now, and smoke began filtering through cracks in the wood. Jack made his choice, crossing to the cradle in 3 quick strides. He looked down and felt his world tilt sideways. The baby was beautiful, perfect in fact. Cherubic face, tiny hands curled into fists, wisps of golden hair catching the firelight. It slept peacefully despite the chaos around it, a slight smile playing at the corners of its mouth. For a moment Jack felt nothing but confusion. This was what had driven men to madness and women to suicide. Then the baby opened its eyes. They were old, ancient, eyes that had seen the rise and fall of civilizations, that held knowledge no infant should possess. They looked at Jack with intelligence that bordered on malevolence, and when the baby smiled wider, he saw teeth, sharp, white, far too many for a human mouth. "Dear God," Jack breathed, stumbling backward. "Now you see," Sarah said softly, "beautiful and terrible, innocent and evil. It doesn't cry, doesn't fuss, just lies there watching with those eyes, learning our weaknesses, growing stronger." The baby's gaze followed Jack as he moved, never blinking, never losing that knowing smile. It raised one tiny hand, and Jack saw that its fingernails were pointed like claws, too long and too sharp for something newly born. "What is it?" he whispered. I don't know, but I've been caring for it for 3 days, and I've seen what it does. Sarah's voice grew distant, remembering. Mrs. Henderson came to visit yesterday. Sweet woman, grandmother to 6. The baby looked at her, just looked, and she started weeping, said it was showing her things, horrible things that would happen to her grandchildren. She left town within the hour. The walls groaned as flames ate at the building's foundation. They had minutes, maybe less, before the structure collapsed. We can't leave it, Sarah said suddenly, moving toward the cradle. Whatever it is, it's helpless. If we run and let it burn, we're no better than murderers. Jack watched her approach the creature, saw how it tracked her movement with those terrible ancient eyes. Sarah don't, but she was already lifting it, cradling it against her chest despite the revulsion he could see in her face. The baby settled against her with a contented sigh, its clawed fingers gently grasping her apron. There's a back window, she said. We can get out that way, head for the desert, find somewhere safe to figure out what to do. Jack looked at the woman holding the abomination, saw her courage despite her terror, and felt something shift in his chest. Right and wrong had never seemed so tangled. Section 5, Full Resolution plus Epilogue. The back window shattered easily under Jack's boot heel. He helped Sarah through first, the baby still clutched in her arms, then followed into the desert night. Behind them the clinic groaned and collapsed in a shower of sparks that painted the sky orange. They walked for an hour in silence, putting distance between themselves and the burning town. Finally, when the glow had faded to a dim smudge on the horizon, Sarah stopped beside a cluster of rocks and sank down heavily. We can't keep running forever, she said. Jack studied the baby in the moonlight. It was still beautiful, still terrible, still watching them with those ancient eyes. But something had changed. The malevolence seemed muted now, replaced by something that might have been curiosity, or even longing. Maybe we don't have to run, he said slowly. Maybe it just needs to be understood. Sarah looked at him sharply. You can't be serious. Think about it. Every adult who's seen it has reacted with fear, hatred, violence. But what if that's what's making it wrong? What if it's feeding on our terror, growing stronger from our revulsion? Jack knelt beside the cradle they'd salvaged from the fire, meeting the baby's gaze directly. This time, instead of horror, he tried to project calm, acceptance. The creature's smile faltered slightly, and for just a moment, Jack glimpsed something vulnerable beneath the ancient intelligence. You're not evil, he said softly. You're just different, and you're scared, aren't you? Scared because everyone who looks at you sees a monster. The baby's eyes filled with tears, the first human emotion Jack had seen from it. Its clawed fingers uncurled, reaching toward him with desperate need. Sarah watched in amazement as Jack carefully lifted the infant. As soon as he touched it, the wrongness began to fade. The teeth retracted, the claws softened into normal baby nails, and the ancient eyes grew young and innocent. How? Sarah breathed. Sometimes the cure for monsters isn't killing them, Jack said gently, rocking the now peaceful baby. Sometimes it's just treating them like they're not monsters at all. Years later, when Sarah had established a new clinic in Silver Falls, and Jack had settled down to raise the boy he'd named Thomas, people would ask about that night in Bitter Creek. They'd heard rumors of a curse, of babies born wrong, of a town driven mad by supernatural evil. Jack would just smile and watch his son play in the dusty yard, a boy who was different, certainly, gifted with an intelligence beyond his years, and an uncanny ability to understand people's deepest fears and desires. But Thomas used his gifts to heal rather than harm, to comfort rather than terrorize, because from his very first night in this world, he'd been shown love instead of horror. The last flames of Bitter Creek had died out that October night, but what rose from those ashes was something far more powerful than fear, the simple revolutionary idea that even monsters could be saved by a little human kindness. The desert wind carried that truth across the territories for generations to come.